Radio Richard.
You've done everything, and it's an interesting thing that a lot of arrangers have said that, they compose, they perform, they do okay, but you kind of get typecast in a way as an arranger. Do you feel that in a way happened to you?
It definitely happened to me because I didn't know enough about the business to, although I was doing other things, you get a label, and unless you change it very early on, it just sticks with you. And it isn't bad, but I did a lot more than just arrange music.
Sure. Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I think you could give us a sort of a special insight into the early days of the music scene here in LA, like in the 50s, because you'd already made hit records.
Yes, well, first of all, you got to understand, I didn't start out to be a musician. My whole ambition was to be a presidential bodyguard. And I spent all of my early days, all of my schooling, everything was geared toward being in the FBI and being a part of the, Secret Service and stuff like that. I was around music all the time. My mother played the piano, and she kind of geared me toward the piano. I had an uncle who actually started the first Afro-American record company, probably in the United States, long before Motown. His name was Jack Lauderdale. And he's the one that discovered Esther Phillips and Mel Walker and Johnny Otis. They were on his label. This is back, I guess I was 9, 10 years old, and he had a record company already. They had a record called Double Crossing Blues and things like that was on his label. So I was around the music all the time. I liked music, and being in Los Angeles, we had several theaters where they had live bands that played. And although I didn't want to be a musician, I was always attracted to music. So I used to go. We had a $1 Million Theater here. We had a Orpheum Theater. We had a Paramount Theater downtown Los Angeles. I lived in the projects, but if you took the streetcar and got off, you get certain stops. You could get off at a club. I used to get off at one club where I saw Joe Letcher and Nellie Letcher and Roy Milton and Big J McNeely and Amos Milburn. Then if I went a little further down the streetcar, I would get up in front of the Paramount Theater, the $1 Million Theater, and I could see, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Louis Jordan. So I used to just hang out. I'm talking about from 6, 7 years old, just hang out around the music and go sit in the back of the theaters and sit in the, in the wings and listen. So I knew all the musicians, although that was the furthest thing from my mind. So I had a good musical background in spite of not wanting to do that.
I mean, you had already learned to play a lot of instruments.
It was, I learned how to play. My mother kind of started me on the piano. I had no formal lessons. There was an organization called the DAPS. It was the Deputy Auxiliary Police, junior police organization. They had a band, and they had a very nice man who came around, and he let me have a saxophone. I think my mother probably paid 10 cents a week or something to rent the saxophone. And then in school, I got a violin. So I played violin in school, and I had a little saxophone. I had a piano at home. And when I got to high school, I wanted to get in well, actually, I didn't want to take any music, but what happened, we have a thing called ROTC here, which is the Reserve Officers Training Corps, and every 10th grader has to take it. But one of the drawbacks of ROTC is you have to march every morning, and you're on the field at 7 o'clock, and it's cold, and I didn't want to be in the ROTC, and somebody told me, if you get in the band, you're in the ROTC, but you only march once a week. So I went to the teacher, Mr. John Farrar, and I asked him, could I get in the band? And he said, what do you play? I said, I play the violin, I play the piano. He says, well, we don't have violin and pianos in the band. And I said, oh, heck, I want to be in the band. So he says, well, can you carry a tuba? And I said, sure. I weighed 117 and the tuba weighed 500, I think. But he needed a tuba for the band, to balance the line off. So I took the tuba. But after about 3 weeks of carrying that tuba, I decided that wasn't a thing for me. So I asked him, could I play another instrument? So he told me, he said, you can't play anything else. I said, well, I'll play a clarinet. He says, you can't play clarinet. I said, well, I can learn. He said, it takes you years to learn how to play clarinet. I said, well, if I had one, I could learn. He said, well, take one and see what you can do. So I took the clarinet home. I took me a book, and about a month and a half, I gave up the tuba and became a clarinet player in the band. He just challenged me. I took the clarinet home. I took an oboe home. I took a French horn home, and at each juncture, he was, no, you'll never learn how to play that, and I did, and it became kind of a hobby. So by the time I got out of high school, I could play almost every instrument. I was in the all-city orchestra, French horn. I played clarinet in the band. I played violin in the string quartet. It was more like a hobby. I wasn't good, but I could play. I could read music very well. So it was fun, but I still didn't want to be a musician.
But of course, that was ideal training for an arranger because
it was great training because you found out what instruments could do and what they couldn't do, how they sound good in certain in certain ranges and such. You found out a lot of stuff like that. Well, I came out of high school. I went into Los Angeles City College, who had one of the best jazz bands in the country, and probably the world. In that band were guys like Bob Florence, Lenny Niehaus, Andre Previn. Those guys were in that All City band. I signed up for the band, myself and another very good friend of mine by the name of Les McCann. Well, we weren't very conventional with our music, and definitely didn't, respect the masters as we should have. So Mr. McDonald called us in after about 3 weeks in the class. He said, "Listen, if you guys drop out now, I'll just give you a no grade. But if you stay, you're going to fail because you guys are never going to be musicians." So Les and I dropped out. So that I didn't have any more music classes. I finished my tenure there. I got an interview with the FBI. I made my interview, made my oral. I was assigned to Louisville, Kentucky. But before I went there was a girl named Mickey Grant who was like a little girlfriend of ours, and so she wrote a song called Pink Shoelaces, and I liked the song, so I made a record of it. And when I went to the bureau, I gave the record, all my masters, to a very good friend of mine across the hall from my little office. Everybody had a record company. 20,000 record companies in Los Angeles. Everybody had one. So I gave all my tapes to a guy named Carl Burns, and I just forgot about it. We just, hey, here, I'm going to leave it, man. You have all this stuff, So 5, 6, 7 months later, I was sitting in the office one day, and a guy came through whistling the song, and he said, I said, "Oh, that song?" He goes, I know that song. I said, "I made that record." He says, No. He said, "This is this #1 record in the country." I said, No. I made that record. He says, "No, you didn't make this record." So I said, "Who's the singer?" So he said, "Dodie Stevens." I said, "I never heard of her, but that's my song and that's my music. I mean, I know that." He says, "No." So I called Carl Burns, and Carl said, "H," says, "I told your mother to call you. We've been trying to find you." He says, "Man, we're rich. We've got this money." The record was #1. I immediately resigned from the bureau and came home with the idea that if I made one record that was a hit, I could make 1,000 records. They would all be hits. Of course, I was broke in about 4 months. I just made records. Just made records. Had a record company. Did the whole bit. Didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was doing, so I was broke again. And
so, how did you make the move from trying to be a solo artist to people asking you to do arrangements?
Well, I was playing gigs. I gigged all the time because I could play all different kind of instruments. I was in country western bands. I was in rock and roll bands. Just played with all these different bands. But there was no money, So it seemed like the guys who were making the money were the guys who were the arrangers. The writers were making money, but I had no connection to know that how the writing would be and the publishing would be. I didn't have the idea and stuff like that. But I knew the arranging, so I knew basically how instruments work. But I didn't have the skill of arranging, and so I looked at the Billboard, and I found the guys who I thought were the best guys. One guy was John Williams, one guy was Ernie Freeman, and one guy was Neil Hefti. So I made some phone calls. And basically what I said was, "Hello, my name is H.B.Barnum, and I'd like you to teach me how to arrange music." And each guy said, "Well, who is this? Why are you calling me?" I said, "Well, you're the best, jazz guy. You're the best pop guy. You're the best, classical guy. I want you to help me." And each guy said yes. Now these guys didn't know I was talking to the other guys. They didn't do this for years later, you know. But I used to go sit at, the sessions and sit there and watch them. I'd meet them early in the morning, and just follow them around all day and listen and watch and learn. And then I started picking a few sessions myself, and I got hooked. Still didn't want to be a musician, but it was a good gig, man. A place you got a chance to travel and meet a lot of nice people and everything. So it worked out fine. I'm having a good time. I'm not serious yet, but one day soon.
One of the many things that's interesting about you is that you've worked with what I guess we could call old school pop, Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and you've worked with the new movement of pop into soul and R&B. Talk about the differences between working in the different genres and the different styles.
Well, for me, it's all music. They are the same notes that rappers use, the same notes that Beethoven uses, the same notes that Sinatra sings, the same notes that B.B. King sings. I mean, it's all music. It's just how you put the formula together. And I guess not being formally trained, I wasn't locked into any certain thing. Whatever you can hear, you should be able to duplicate or at least create something with. I have been fortunate in that respect because today even I work with Puff Daddy one day, then the next day I work with Aretha, the next day I work with Phil Collins, the next day I work with I'm going to do a K-Star arrangement or a Kenny Smith arrangement. So I've been lucky that way. It's all music, and I respect all of it. There's some jazz I don't like, there's some rap I don't like, there's some gospel I don't like. But basically, I think everybody when they go in to do what they do, they do it because they believe in it, and because I don't necessarily like it or it's not my cup of tea, I still respect the fact that they made the effort to do it. I don't think anybody ever creates a song or writes an arrangement or sings a song they don't believe in it, or so wouldn't do it. And I've had some experiences that I know I don't even try to critique anybody's music. I'll say, well, this is something I like, this is something I might not like. I had an experience one time, a guy sent me a tape. It was so bad. I shouldn't even say it bad. It was so bad, and the guy was so sincere, he must have called me 700 times. So, in my expertise, I sit down and wrote this nice letter. And I explained to him how that everybody doesn't have to be a singer or an artist. That if you want to be a music business, you might be a publisher or a manufacturer or, a roadie, all these different things. So don't worry if you can't be a singer. And I sent this letter back to him along with this tape. And 2 weeks later, this thing was the #1 record in the country. I can't even think of the name of the song. It goes, "One Room Shack in the back of the Cadillac." It was like, with bam, Prince. Prince came. I didn't know what to do with him. In fact, if I had done so, he probably would have been a hit. A friend of mine, Mr. Smith in Indianapolis, sent Prince to me and sent him home. He probably did the thing I did. He came on, made a star. So you never know. You go with what you believe in. Doesn't matter what type of music it is. I can conduct a symphony or write symphonic music. I can write. Have artists. I've been to Poland the last couple of years. I've been to Mexico. I do Don Ho, Morello Radovich. I do people out of Mexico, France. It doesn't matter. It's just music. And the good thing about it is, as long as we have that little piece of paper we can put in front of people, everybody, no matter where you're from, what country, what language, you put that piece of paper down, and everybody agrees. Everybody goes along with the program, and whoever's standing in front with that little piece of paper, everybody listens to it and follows for that period of time. That doesn't happen in anything else. It doesn't happen in any other life, any kind of business, only in this business.
Every arranger seems to have their own working method. When, let's say, for instance, somebody calls you, we need you, in the studio next Tuesday. This is the thing we want. Here, we're sending you over the CD, and we need, orchestral overdubs on this tune.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach it?
I like to, if necessary, just meet the artist for a minute, just to have a communication with them. I've been real fortunate that I don't have to work with people I don't like. Now, well, if I say I don't like them, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It just means this: I don't connect with them. And so I feel that everything I've had a chance to arrange or be a part of, it's been because there's some connection between the people. I like to have the material as soon as possible. I listen to it. I may not write the arrangement till the night before the session, but I will have listened to that music. I'll put it in the car. I'll just run around singing it. I'll play it at home, and so you get to feel the music. Uh, it's like to making if I was to make the outfit for you. It's one thing just to look at you. It's another thing to measure you. It's another thing to see you walk and watch you move around to see how that has a look on you. So I like to approach it like that. I like to have time to be with the person just sit and talk over a cup of coffee or something. Don't have to talk about music, but in observing them, because I'm going to do something for them that's going to meet the change both of our lives, and hopefully I'll get to know more about them than about me, and we'll do something more than just make a piece of music. We'll make some history.
So when you do actually get down to writing the arrangements,
Fast. Yeah, because by that time I've already got the information. That's just the mechanics. But I know if I see your head move like that, that oboe's gonna sound great and that flute's gonna that's that passage. I know that by just being around and hearing the song. And
well, I can see from all the music lying around that you are a man who uses pen and paper. Now,
I sure do.
Have you has technology changed that? I mean, are you using computers now?
Oh God, yes. About 10 years ago, somebody told me about computers, so I bought a Atom computer, I guess it is. I took it home. I have my oldest son. He called me and said, "Dad, listen to this," and he showed me, had me play something. And said, I played it. And said, "Listen to that." So we started our music company. I have a full-fledged studio at home with all the computer stuff. I don't know how to work anything, but in fact, this new album we have here, the new stuff here, everything's computer. I do a lot of stuff computer. A lot of the shows we do are just computer. Sometimes it's computer and some live guitar, live something. But now, especially with things like Pro Tools and stuff, where there's no tape anymore. I remember we used to leave the studio with just big boxes of tape and stuff. Like now, you leave with something like this, and your whole session's on there, and it sounds great. The diehards, well, it doesn't have the depth of tape. It doesn't want that's crap, man. I mean, the consumer's going to hear what they hear. If the music sounds good, if it feels good, that's what they're going to buy. And I think you have to give it up and say that that's what it is now. Telephones are different now. TVs are different now. Cars are different now. So it's all different.
Also, as an arranger, I guess the great thing about Pro Tools that I find is you can alter your arrangement much quicker.
Oh yes, you can make changes. You can edit things. And I'm not afraid it's going to replace anybody or anything like that. I think that the good music people will always be the good music people. The bad music will always be bad music, and the technology won't change that. In other words, if somebody, because they have a lot of technology, they're not going to become a great writer. That doesn't make them a great writer. They have to be some creative. What I like about it, I think, is if I want to do a session with a guy that maybe can't get to Los Angeles right now, I can email him something. He can do it, email it back to me, or MPG, and we can communicate. I still get his soul. I still get it what he wants to add to it, and I can take it and put it into my project. I think that's great. We do a lot of sessions where artists is one place, the orchestra is another place. I think that's great. I love it.
Now, of course, when you started out doing arrangements, none of this was possible, and perhaps you can give us a feel for what the studio scene was like here in the 50s.
When I started out, we had mono, and we'd make maybe 1, 2, or 3 takes. We'd rehearse, make 1, 2, 3 takes, and that would be it. and some of the EQ things that were available, you could maybe boost the bass a little bit, put a little high end on. That was it. Music sounded good. I remember when they came out with hi-fi, and they had stereo. And my God, you could hear from two sides of the speakers. That was just great. And then 2-track, there's 3-track, 4-track, 8-track, 16-track. Now it's kind of ridiculous for the person that doesn't know what they're doing. They need 500 tracks to make a song. The people who are talented can still go in there and, they take advantage of maybe 16, 24 tracks and come up with a product. It's still going to boil down to people who have talent, people who don't have talent. There's always somebody lucky. Some guy wins the lottery every day. Doesn't make him smart. That's luck, and that's always going to exist in any business. But the people who are there year after year after year are going to be people who are talented people.
Well, speaking of talented people, of course, I got to ask what it was like working with Sinatra.
Well, very short. I remember he came into the studio. First of all, I was at a point in my career where I could any musicians I wanted, I would get the musicians I wanted. It just so happened in this particular case, they said the drummer I would use, Earl Palmer, I used a lot. Hal Blaine, I used a lot. That's why I want Hal Blaine. Says, no, we have to use Irv Cotler. Well, I wasn't aware of Irv Cotler. And when this guy came in with these old drums and started setting up, most of the drummers, I know they had Cartage come in and their stuff, And this guy bought his own drum, and I said, God, this is my first shot with Sinatra, and it's going to be, this guy is going to wreck my whole session. Man, this guy was so great. He said, so Sinatra walked in. He heard the playback. We ran the track down. He says, who wrote this? So where's that kid been? We're going to be seeing a lot of him. He made 2 takes and said, that's it, and left. That was it.
Did he record with live?
Yeah, live, that's right. Now, I will say this. He, there was a club here. It's now the Laugh Factory or something, but it used to be a little hangout where all the stuff. And show you how hip he is. I was in there one night with a bunch of friends, and we were having dinner, and Sinatra and Mia Farrow walked in and sat down, way across the room, and it's Frank Sinatra, so I didn't want to be, go over there and bother, even though we had our little encounter and everything, how wonderful, He got up and came on my table and said, Barnum, how you doing? I says, man, that was a great piece of music you wrote. And says, we're going to be doing something again. And man, I was in hall heaven. Man. Frank? Sure, It was really nice. He's really a great guy, man. He just was, he was a really great guy.
And, I can see on your massive list of credits that you actually arranged for the Duke Ellington Band.
Duke Ellington Band, Count Basie Orchestra, Stan Kenton.
Well, how did those things come about?
I don't know. People just call. I've had a manager for about 2 years. They didn't do anything for me, but people call me. Other people tell other people. Highlights. I get a call one day and say, "Hi, H.B.Barnum. This is Lena Horne." Lena Horne. Oh my God! My heart was going like this. She said, I'm coming out to Los Angeles. I need some charts. I want you to do some charts for me. And man, you used to remember clean up the office. Everybody wore a suit, man. Everybody was all clean. She walked in the old T-shirt and some jeans and stuff. It's just, it was just like, it was wonderful, But I had a lot of fun, Peggy Lee, K-Star, all the oldies, and then when you get a chance to do something with your idol like Louis Jordan, I wrote a couple of things for the band, And the Basie, I got with Basie because I was singing with a group called the Rawls. That's how I met Basie. And we had a little hit called Cherry Lips on the Whippet label, Gene Norman. And we were singing, and the Count Basie band was actually like second billing to us at that time. They hadn't come on with the Joey or something. So And I really, I could write the music, but I had never really written for that kind of a situation. And I wrote this arrangement, and I forgot to put the key signature in. And musicians can be very cruel. So when we started off the thing, of course, it just just a bunch of noise. And the guy started laughing, and I started crying, and I ran out. And I remember Marshall Royal came out, and he said, man, he says, all you did, just put the key signature in, and back. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. He said, you're going back in there. And Marshall took me and grabbed me and said, you get back in there and tell them, well, shut up and play the music like they know what's supposed to be. They know they put the key signature in. So that was good. Down in Washington, I was 13, 14. I used to hang out, hang out at the clubs, sit in the back rooms and stuff like that, but I could play every Down in Washington song. I could play any song she sang, I knew it on the piano. And she was appearing, there was a club in Los Angeles called the Oasis. She was appearing there, was Down in Washington with Red Fox and Slappy White and Lon Fontaine dance. They had a big review show here. The piano player was Elmo Hope. And Elmo was going through his problems that time. Because he'd been sitting at the piano all night and had played it, he'd just been sitting there all night, no music. And the lady that owned the club knew I knew Dottie and I watched the song, so they called my mother and asked her to come to the club. She said, we can't come to the club. Well, we're going to bring him in, just let him play, and we'll put him in the back. He won't be in the club. Really. So, and Mom, please, I'm done. Why don't play at home? God, Mom, I want to go. So they picked me up. I went to the club. I remember walking in, and it was people have been waiting for the show. It's about 10:15 now. The show's supposed to go at 8:30, and people, so they said, just go to the, we're going to start right now. And the first song, I knew the song. What I didn't know is that they had changed the key because their voices cut off. They brought everything down the step. So they counted off. I hit the key to the record, and the band was in the other key. And she turned around and said some things to me that were just horrible. She just littered me. I started crying, man. I ran out of the club. Red Fox came out and got me. Said, get back in there. And he said, sing the song in the right key. She said, okay. And she sang it. I played that night. She took me in a room for 6 months. When I was 6 months, 30 years.
When you were 13?
Yeah. The only reason I came back was I had to go back to school. I was out of 6 months and 9 and just playing the piano, So I have had a chance to work with all the really good people, And I'm not stymied by any style or any particular thing. If it's music, just bring it to me and I can do it.
Well, how old were you when you hit the daunting task of arranging for the Ellington Band?
I was doing stuff for the bands like that when I was 17, 18, 20, yeah. But, it wasn't that good, but it was, things that they could play.
Well, I guess most people have the impression that, he and Louis Strayhorn just wrote everything.
Oh, there were a lot of people that wrote for the band. I mean, they every once in a while, every band has charts from, I would say I probably have charts from over 500-600 different artists' books, I mean, Louis Prima, Keely Smith, that's an odd thing for me to, Harry James, you get one chart in. Sometimes it's because they have a singer in the band that needs something special, they'll come to somebody to do it. Sometimes they hear about you, they just want to see if you can do it or not. They will call you and say, hey, I heard, can you do something? Oh, yes.
What do you think contributes to your ability to be so versatile?
I'm still trying to find out what I'm doing. I'm trying to find my way through.
Well,
it's just music, man.
Okay, let's talk about in the 50s, of course, all kinds of new music was coming to the fore, R&B, soul, rock and roll. What were some of the first artists that you got involved with in these styles?
Well, I was singing with a lot of groups. In Los Angeles here, we had the Penguins, the Dootones, the Medallions. And they were all the same guys. Basically, one night we'd be here, we'd be Don Jr. and the Metal Rocks this night, and the next night we'd be this group. Depending where the gig was, it was promoting, Uh, and I would be the one probably to do the sketch out the. If we had a band, I'd be the one to sketch out the chords for everybody. I think my serious arranging gigs, as far as I was concerned, started in the '60s when I got involved with the Motown group, because I used to go back and forth to Detroit, and it would be pieces that would they would say here's 17 tracks that need strings and horns, or here's you do the rhythm and then Paul's going to do the strings and then Dave Van Pete's going to do this. So sometimes we never even knew the name of the song. We knew we had the groove and the little melody line, but we didn't even know what the song was. Nor would we know what artist it was for. It's just music, sometimes it would only be a 2 or 3 bar turnaround that you had to just develop into something.
So you wouldn't have a melody on the track?
Half the times we wouldn't know what the melody would be. There would be, if you listen to all the Motown stuff of that era, most of the things you could tell the song by the introductions, by the way the chord progressions started. And most of those songs had pretty lengthy introductions on them. Unlike most stuff now just started playing, most of them had nice introductions on them. So I know in working with Eddie, Brian and Eddie, them, we could suddenly say we get 4 or 5 bars. So
well, that's really interesting about the Motown thing. So who would you like? Who would call you up? Would it be Berry Gordy or?
Hank Cosby or Johnny Bristol or Brian or Eddie would call me sometime, or Smokey would call. Whoever was doing a session and say, listen, we need to do horns and strings on this. We need to do a rhythm track on this. And sometimes the title would be just a working title. And, now it was a little more organized here with the Capitol and RCA stuff, because I would actually write out a full arrangement and working with Dave and people like that. We'd actually write a full chart and everything. But some of the Motown stuff was just developed in the studio. I used to go into Cincinnati, I like to work for King, and most of the stuff was just developed in the studio. Most of the Dootones stuff was just developed in the studio. I always like to have some kind of a working map, because that way I always thought that if you had to stay in the studio 4 days and do a track, you were just wasting your own money. So, but a lot of people pride themselves. Well, it took us 6 months to cut this song. I don't know if it would have been any better if they cut it in 2 days. I think it would have been the same thing. But that seems to be when I was in the studio business, people call a book studio for 6 months. What are you doing? We're going to cut 4 sides. Well, just put it for the time you need. Oh no, it's going to take 6 months to do this. Fine, But I don't believe it. I think if you know what you're doing when you go in, you should be able to come out of there. It's just money you're wasting.
How would you contrast working in what sounds like a kind of a factory atmosphere of Motown to working with James Brown?
Well, see, James is one of those brilliant people. He knows what he wants. James, Sly, Ike Turner, Brian and Eddie, and the Holland Dozier team, they know exactly what they want. They may not be able to articulate it to you properly, but if you keep listening to them, it'll come about. Stevie was very strict. Stevie's first one for me to start to write music that wasn't, 8 bars. His stuff was kind of twisted, and a lot of times I heard guys say, "No, you can't do that. That doesn't fit." It all fits. It's up to the arranger, the architect to say, "I want 10 light sockets and 4 bathrooms." It's up to the guy to make it look good, make it put it in place. So the changes in the music and the changes in working with different people, personalities, that would be a problem sometimes, because different people have different personalities. Like Lamont used to like to work late at night. Well, Eddie liked to do stuff in the daytime. So sometimes you have to meet with one guy and then meet with the other guy, and then sometimes you all met together. But sometimes, Lamont could stay up all night and just work and work and work. I like to work at night. But it would just depend, on who you're doing. Capitol was organized because, they had the studio, they had their own staff of people, and each one of them worked a little different. Nick Day worked a little bit, Dave Axelrod, he worked a little bit if the Steve Douglas did, and so on. So you had to kind of play the personalities.
At Motown, did you mainly work, as you said, on overdubs, or did you also work in Studio A with Funk Brothers on rhythm section?
Oh, I worked with the Funk Brothers. I worked. You were just there, and you were in the Army, and you just filled in the spot where the spot was needed. And I think that's what made it so good too, because everybody kind of contributed to something. If people say, "Well, what did you arrange?" I said, "Well, I think I arranged something on that because it sounds like me." But then again, as you remember, in the beginning, Motown never put arrangers' names or anything on their records. You just never knew who did what. And I think that was for two reasons. I don't want to get into things Motown, but if they never did that, then people never got big. They were there in the factory. But once you start letting people know who they are, then other people start calling those same people to do things. And in the beginning, none of the Motown arrangers did anything for anybody else except Motown. Where if you went to Capitol RC, it said arranged by a certain person, then that would be your entree other jobs and stuff like that.
Could you pick out a couple of tracks that you'd say, like a couple of Motown tracks that you'd say, well, I did a hell of a lot on this one, and
Yeah. You take a song like I Wish It Would Rain, I know I did the string parts of that, but I don't know if that was a title when I did it. You hear the music and you say, I know I did that. But that's not the name of the song when I did it. No.
As you said, you didn't know who the artist was.
After you didn't. That changed near the end, because near the end, by the time the Supremes were getting ready to break up and someday we'd be together, we knew that was for the Supremes only. But there were a lot of times we recorded something that we thought would be for Gladys that wound up being for Marvelettes or for Martha, and vice versa, So a lot of times that happened. And, their quality control was probably the best of any label in history as far as knowing just what the pulse for people were going to be. So, but you didn't have any way of knowing once you put it in the pot what was going to come out on the other side. So,
well, let's contrast all of that with stuff that you're doing today. I mean, your working methods today.
Today it's very. The music's the same, but it's the difference. It's business today, and I'm not really caught up in it probably like I should be. That's probably why I don't do enough stuff. Have a nice clientele. I don't have to struggle for work or something like that, because it's different. It's business. It's numbers. If the numbers don't generate, I don't think companies care about how talented you are. If you're not generating numbers, you got to go. I think 35, 40 years ago, companies were interested, in long-time careers for artists. In other words, make an artist who was going to live for 30, 40 years. I think today companies are interested in making a hit record. And they can manufacture hits as fast as they can find the people that look a certain way, that can dance and look good on the camera. I don't think it has that much to do with talent. Now, I'm not saying some talented people don't come through, because I think there's some very talented people out there. I just don't think they'll develop into long careers because there's no training ground anymore. I mentioned that I used to go and sit and listen to bands. I'm not going to. Most of the guys out of that time period spent time going to sessions and playing with other people and just interchanging ideas, sitting around talking about music. I remember Dennis Buttermere, Tommy Tedesco, and I, and Cal Blaine, we used to leave a gig and go up to Griffith Park and sleep in the park all night and get up and walk and talk about music. And I didn't even want to be a musician, but it was just so cool being with the guys, I remember Eric Dolphy. I used to at Eric's house. Eric would practice all day and all night. I said, I never heard anybody practice like that. My first band, I had Eric Dolphy, Charlie Lloyd, Lester Robinson, Carol Kay. I put Carol on bass because I had Dennis Buttermere on guitar. I had two guitar players. Carol was a guitar player. She was a guitar player with Ida Ray Hutton's all-girl band. I put Carol on bass. I think she mentions that in her book. I mean, because I had a guitar player. So, but you just live and make music. Today, I don't see the young people going out to hear somebody else sing. If they're not gigging, they're not getting paid, they don't do it. It's all business. So I wonder what's going to happen. Uh, a singer coming up 25 years ago, if you said, sing a song, they could sing 15 jazz songs, 30 pop songs, 10 gospel songs. The singers today, and I mean the top people, they know 2 songs, their hit and maybe somebody else's big hit. They don't know any of the songs. It's a pleasure working with Aretha, because Aretha will sing on the program this week. She will sing an Irish medley, Waiting for O'Leary, and she'll sing Chain of Fools, and then she may sing My Heart Will Go On. You get a chance to do a vast, array of music, but the kids now, most of them don't have any idea other than what they're doing, and it's very successful. So I guess why should they do anything else? My thing is, if things change, if the economy does something crazy, they had to go out and just sing in a club, better than going to work at the phone company, they could go sing in the club. They wouldn't know what to sing if they couldn't sing their own song, and that bothers me.
I was talking to Jerry Wexler about 2 weeks ago, and he was telling me in the early days how much he would kind of take control of the sessions and sit at the piano and say, "This is the way it's going to be, guys."
That's right.
And is she still like that?
There's a sign in the other room there that says, "The boss is always right." That's rule number 1. And if there's any discrepancy, rule number 2 says refer to rule number 1. She's always right. That's right. And anybody that I work for, they're always right. And if I work for them, they're right. Now, I can give them suggestions. It's my job to give them all the information that is available so that they can make a correct decision. And when they make the decision, they're right. Now, is it a decision I would make? Maybe not. But when I'm the boss here, I'm right. And I don't mind that. We all do some crazy things, and other people look and say, "God, why are they doing that?" But that's just the way it is.
What is it, do you think, that has made your relationship go on for so long?
Because first of all, I respect your talent. I've had a chance, to take jobs with a lot of other artists who pay far more money. I would get a chance to travel to better places. They've had more hits right now than she does, but the lady can sing, and every time she sings, I learn something. And I think that every time that I go out with an artist like that, with an Aretha, or with a Tony Bennett, I learn something. And I think it's a process you just want to learn and grow. And thank the Lord I don't have to worry just because it's just a money gig. I can do things, and I think every time that she sings, it's like history. It's not like just doing a gig.
I couldn't agree with you more about that. Tell me this. Do you think that the attitude of the business towards the arranger has changed in the 50 years that you've been?
Yes, because with the technology, everybody just imagines that they can do, what I'm doing, because they can sit there and figure it out. In a sense, they can sit there and figure it out. I may arrive at the total of everything faster. But, if you get a kid that sits down, he gets himself a computer and a keyboard, and 3 weeks from now he's got a record that charts, how can you then tell him that he needs an arranger or that he needs anything? He's done it all. So he may be lucky enough to go through his whole life never having to realize that he doesn't know anything. And there are people like that. I'm sure there are people like that in your business. There's a lot like that in my business. I know people in my business who are conductors, arrangers. They can carry music in a bucket, but they are at the top of the ladder. Now, I respect the fact they're very successful. My own personal opinion about how good they are, that's my opinion. It doesn't mean anything. What if I was to say that guy doesn't know anything about music? This guy is like, conducting in the top place in the world. I'd look like a fool talking about it. He's making 10 times more than I make. I was amazed. One of my very good friends, who's a very, very big arranger for a very big artist in this business, and we were talking about the good old days. Now, I said, well, man, I can remember times when the promoter coming in and says, man, I'm sorry, guys, I just got robbed. I can't pay you tonight. He says, we've always got paid. I said, you mean you never had a gig where you didn't get paid? And I told BB King said, he can never play the blues. I said, how does he know anything about the blues? Now, this guy makes a blues record, it's a big hit. But he doesn't, it's just a hit because it's manufactured well, promoted well, he's top of the ladder. But he doesn't really know anything about the blues. But that's irrelevant because that's our frame of reference. And his frame of reference is he's got a #1 record. Our frame of reference, he doesn't know anything about the blues, but who cares? The people out there don't know the difference. They're going to take what they get. I had a class this morning, started with the 3rd and 4th graders, and we showed the instruments, and the teacher said, do you know what those instruments are? And the kid looked at the flute and said, that's a trumpet. They don't know.
Do you think that a lot of this attitude is because of the infrastructure of the way record companies are? I mean, for instance, could you contrast for us the difference between the music-loving entrepreneurs of the 50s and 60s and the kind of record executives you deal with now?
The music entrepreneurs of the 50s and 60s will all be dead in the next 20 years. So we don't even, they're not part of the world anymore. The people now, it's about the money and its numbers. And I don't care if it's the music business or the shoe business or the real estate business. It's about how much profit are we going to earn. It's happening in Las Vegas. It's happening in the club business. 30 years ago, we had too many A&R men in most companies, but every A&R man knew something about music. They either played an instrument. In other words, you and I are A&R men. We could listen to this artist sing, and we could say, I bet you we put strings here and blah, blah, blah there. You can't talk about that to guys in companies now. They don't care about strings and stuff. They want to know what market is going to go to, who's going to buy it, how much it's going to cost to promote it, and that's it. So the artist is caught in a situation where they either have to think about, can I get a hit right now? How much money can I make right now? Because if I don't make this hit right now, I won't be here next week because the guy in the record company is not going to sit here with me for 5 years spending money on me because he knows I have talent, because he knows I'm an Aretha or I'm an Rawls or I'm a Peggy Lee. They don't care. It's about the money because they won't be there.
So I was talking to Jeremy Lubbock yesterday, and he was saying that he had been recently told on a session, you cannot write the strings above the staff because it's not commercial. Now, have you ever been, as an arranger, that made me angry, but have you ever been curtailed in that way or told, no, you can't write this because it's not commercial?
No, not that way. I've had instances where, especially when I first started, you write too much sometimes, and you overshadow the singer, and sometimes they will bananas on you, But no, and I don't know what that particular situation was. It may have been a song that didn't need high string, you go in a situation that sometimes you do a session with somebody and then there's maybe 3 arrangers, and you'll call the contract and say, well, no, we've got 14 violins, 2 or 4 cellos. You 14 violins, you got to write something for 14 violins, whether the song leads or not. You got to write something for those 14 violins, man. So sometimes you can get carried away. Now, I don't know what that particular situation was, but I've never had anybody tell me, how high or how low to write. They may say in the session, say, well, that's a little busy there. Can we change that? And that's not a problem.
How much easier is it, for instance, today with computerized parts to change things than it was in the old days?
The only thing that's easier, if you want to change something in a computerized part, you don't have to call the musicians back in, and you can make better edits. You could edit with tape, but it wouldn't be as clean and as precise. And you can take something and fly it to another spot, which you couldn't do with tape. So, that part's easy. The technology has made it much easier to do things like that. But as far as the creativity, it doesn't help any. And it doesn't say, you spend just as much time with the computer as you do with a pencil paper.
Another question I'm asking a lot of the different arrangers I'm talking to is to name a couple of other arrangers who they really admired and why.
Well, I said from the very beginning, I admired Ernie Freeman, Neil Hefti, John Williams. I was very, very fond of Dave Van Der Peter and Neil and Paul Reiser from Motown. But these guys were just fantastic. George Martin. I mean, I don't think there'd be no Beatles without George Martin. I mean, what he did with that music, he made people want to listen to it. Because I don't know, it would just been a rock band without him, I think, and I don't think it would have happened like that. So I loved him. And then today, Gene Page. I mean, old buddy Gene writes some beautiful, beautiful string parts.
I find as an arranger, one of the reasons this is fun is because you never get a chance to talk to other arrangers. You're talking to musicians all the time. You're talking to record company people, artists, but you very rarely get the chance to work with other arrangers.
Well, arranger is a term, and I'll tell you why. And I'm not trying to put down my own thing, because I think we're fantastic. But when you say arranger, a lot of times you hire musicians for what they're going to bring to a thing. Like you put a chord down, and that guy will start playing something that's around that chord, and all of a sudden that actually becomes part of the identity of that song, which in fact is the arrangement. And that guy bought that there. He bought that to the session, not you. You had what you might have had in your mind. I just finished the thing today, and I used a guitar player named Grant Geisman. Grant is just fantastic. And we were doing this song, and the song is really cool. We think the song's going to be a hit. But Grant started playing some of the guitar, and I said, look, forget what I put on that paper, man. That's what I want. He was just fooling around. He said, you sure? I said, yeah, man. That's fantastic. So in fact, you're any creative person is an arranger. We may have the ability to notate it and kind of organize it so everybody goes the same way at the same time. But literally every creative person, Aretha's an arranger. She can sing a song that would inspire me to go and rewrite something I've written because she just did something vocally that, boy, if I just change this right here and let her do that, I hope she do it again. I want to remind her, read this is what you did, so let's change this. So we're all arrangers in a sense. We're all producers in a sense. I mean, being an arranger, how many times did you get a guy that gives you 5 songs and tells you to meet him at the session? and you go back and you create all this. How many times you written an introduction that becomes the key for the song? Without that introduction, the song probably would never got heard. So we all have a. It's really like everybody making a big pot of soup. Everybody puts something in that tastes good. Maybe individually those things would have tasted good, but all together it seems really good.
And I can't thank you enough for making the time to see us.
Well, I thank you for thinking about us arrangers, because there's so many guys in the country. I mean,
are you a long-distance truck driver who'll be driving across the country, stopping only at a filthy diner to relieve yourself of the interminable boredom? Great! While you're driving, join me, Richard Niles, for my podcast, Radio Richard. Intriguing interviews and peripatetic performances from master musicians like Randy Brecker, Wayne Shorter, Nile Rodgers, and the Yellow Jackets. And even if you don't drive a truck, I can guarantee that Radio Richard will spin your tires. Don't miss a moment of the fun. Subscribe to
Radio Richard.
Thank you.